What are we talking about this week?
Spelt bread. Okay.
Helen has just made her first ever loaf of spelt bread.
I have, yeah.
Actually, no, you've made your first 3 loaves of spelt bread.
Yeah. The first 2 weren't so good. So I've always made bread, even when the boys were little. Not like the traditional bread maker. I'm not that dedicated. But just recently, I've been getting a few problems. So I thought, I'm going to cut out wheat. So I knew Penny had made spelt bread, and you have done for a long time, haven't you? But mine, they came out like this and looked beautiful. Oh, this is going really well. And then by the time I went to get them out, they just went. So it was like a bit of a concave loaf thing. It tasted nice. I still ate it.
Yeah.
It just wasn't very good for slicing.
No.
So then I emergency texted Penny saying, "What have I done wrong?" And I just had it on the wrong setting. So you saved me, didn't you?
I'm going to start off by talking about why we eat spelt bread in my household. A lot of people nowadays, have problems with their guts. They get trapped wind, they get discomfort, they get gnawing hunger shortly after eating bread or something with wheat in it. And nastier, bigger problems, the sort of the whole ileocecal problems and problems with the, what's it called? Where the gut, diverticulitis and things of that sort. So now the reason we stopped using wheat was because James, my son, had a lot of serious allergies. We spent many years, we had him on a gluten-free diet. We thought gluten was the problem. But then we discovered that there were certain times that he could eat gluten and it wasn't a problem. So, for example, he had Rice Krispies, had gluten in it. So gluten couldn't have been the issue. And it took a little while for us to find out that it's actually wheat that's the issue. And that took a bit more research. So I'm going to tell you a story. I grew up on a farm in Dorset. My parents were dairy farmers and they also grew arable. So that we had about 600 acres, biggish farm, not by some standards, but certainly by Gloucestershire standards, biggish farm. And we would probably grow, I would say, 10 or 12 fields of corn of various sorts. Now, what would happen is farmers would plant their corn either in the autumn or in the following spring, and they would watch it grow. And I remember my mother used to go up the farm and she would actually check to see how the corn was growing. And it would get to a point in May and June, you had a lovely field of whatever you were growing. It would be tall, it would be strong looking, it would all be coming into ear. It would be green, obviously, but looking really healthy. It's a good crop, it's all looking great. And then July, it's all looking really good. And then August, you would get your heavy rains in warm air and it would beat the crop down to the ground. And because the ground was warm and wet, it would sprout. So that's it, you lost your crop. Now, I don't want anybody to be under an illusion. Farmers are under huge stress. They do not have an easy job to make an income of any sort. We've got them hammered into this tiny space of you've got to make cheap food, you've got to make plenty of it, it's got to be an extremely high quality, you've got to be, everything. We have this hammered into a circle, and you've got to be producing milk. What do we sell milk at in supermarkets? Don't get me started.
Yeah. And if you do too little, you get penalised. If you do too much,
absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. Absolutely ridiculous. So therefore, I remember, I think I was about 12 and I came home from school and my parents they had the ICI rep there who had just sold them their seed for the year, for planting for the next winter. And they were laughing because they'd just bought wheat with straw stiffeners. Now it turns out that I now look back, when I was a child, wheat would be about 3'6" high. So if I'm standing up, if I'm standing up as an adult, it would be about here. Right. It was tall.
Yeah.
If you stop by the road now and look at a field of wheat, which is the one with the hairy ears, I've got that right, haven't I? Yes, that's wheat with the hairy ears. It's probably about that high. It is really small. It's about 12 inches high. And this is how they've managed to stop it flopping over in heavy rains in August.
Yeah.
And they did this by hybridization. At the same time, they also gave it a resistance to powdery mildew, because the other big problem he had as a farmer was getting corn in and dry, because if it was wet, fungus would grow on it. And again, you've lost your crop. You've lost your crop. Everything, all the way through, there are reasons for losing your crop. Another thing makes you lose your crop. And so fungus was a big issue, powdery mildew. So they gave it resistance to powdery mildew. Now, I just want to make a point here. If the fungus around in the atmosphere is struggling to digest your food, the bacteria in your gut will be struggling to digest your food. So it makes you start realising that the bread on the shelf in the supermarket, when it's got 3 weeks of life on it, its sell-by date, you think, well, if the bacteria in the supermarket can't eat it, how are the bacteria in my gut going to eat it? And do bear in mind that the vast amount of your gut function is heavily reliant on a healthy bacterial flora. So, taking the story forward, farmers are now growing a different kind of wheat to what it was when I was a child, but it's gone a stage further. Nowadays, farmers don't buy their own combine harvester unless they have a very big estate to run. So when I was a child, my father was harvesting about 10 fields, but he owned his own combine harvester. Cost about the price of a good size house. You're a small farmer and you're buying something which sits in the barn for most of the year that costs the price of a small house or a good size house. So nowadays, to buy a combine harvester, about £400,000 or £500,000. It's a huge amount of outlay. And you're not going to use it for most of the year if you're a farmer. So now what they do is they don't own their own combine harvester. They get a contractor from just up the road. That contractor hasn't got 10 or 12 fields to do. He's got hundreds. And I talked to our local contractor here, and they start working 7 days a week from May when they start making hay. And they're working 7 days a week, virtually no days off, long days, right the way through to the beginning of November as they harvest the different crops throughout the year. So I just want to talk about the amount of hours that they're working to get food onto our tables. But there's another thing that crops up here. And that is that he will phone Farmer Jones on Saturday morning and he'll say, look, I've just looked at the weather forecast this week. We've got to combine when it's dry, because if you're bringing crops in when they're wet, you either spend a fortune drying them or you risk them rotting, which they will do if you bring them in wet. So the ideal is to combine when it's dry. So what he does is he says to the farmer, it's going to be dry on Wednesday. I want to come and do your wheat on Wednesday. And the farmer says, well, that's great, but it's not ripe yet. It needs, I would say, another 2-3 weeks to be ripe. So that is where they do something that they never used to do when I was a child. They spray it with what I call Roundup or with glyphosate.
To speed it up.
Because it kills it. It desiccates it.
Right. Oh, gosh.
Now, when we heard that they do this, we didn't believe it. It felt like a lie. And then we thought, oh, maybe they do it in America, they don't do it here.
Yeah.
And then I spoke to our local farmers and said, yeah, we have to. We have to because we've got no choice. So now the thing about glyphosate is if you were to drink a pint of glyphosate, I'm not recommending you do it. It wouldn't kill you. It is not poisonous, but it will wipe out the flora in your gut. It will wipe out the bacterial flora in your gut. So every time you're eating conventional, a lot of cereals, not just wheat, but every time you're eating conventional wheat, you're helping to wipe out the bacterial flora in your gut.
And you don't know which ones, what's been sprayed and what hasn't. Some of them, I presume,
if you want
naturally.
it not sprayed, you've got to go for organic nowadays.
So what is spelt then?
Spelt is a very ancient form of wheat.
Right.
Very ancient form. and almost disappeared from our shelves. And I think because of what's happened with wheat, it's making a big increase there. It's not, a lot of people think they're gluten-free, and we get people that come here who think they're gluten-free, and they give me advance notice of what their diet is, and they say, I'm gluten-free. And my first question to them is, are you sure you're gluten-free, or are you actually just wheat-free? And I only know one person that's genuinely gluten-free, and that's Sharon.
Oh,
everybody else I know that thought they were gluten-free.
It's the wheat.
It's wheat.
Oh, that's really interesting, isn't it?
And so I make spelt bread or spelt pastry or spelt cakes. Anywhere I use flour, I use spelt. I make sure it's organic spelt.
So, because I was asking you before, which is why we thought we'd do this, because it is quite complicated. Wheat-free bread is different again.
Wheat-free spelt makes wheat-free bread.
Yes.
But there are other things.
But there are specific wheat-free.
Rye, if it's
flours.
100% rye, it would be wheat-free. If it was 100%, whatever. As long as it doesn't contain wheat, it's wheat-free bread. But don't get it muddled with gluten-free bread.
Which is different.
Gluten-free bread tends to be made with various sorts of corn and things of that sort. It's much more complicated to make. It's much more available in the supermarkets. Tends to contain a lot more sugar. And is very expensive to manufacture. When we started producing spelt bread contains gluten, doesn't contain the amount of gluten that wheat contains, which is where you came a cropper when you made your first 2 loaves.
Yeah, because they suck.
So I'm going to give you a recipe for spelt bread.
Yeah, we'll put it out. Yeah.
And we'll put it out rather than me say it.
I think so. I'll type it up for you.
She's going to type it up.
Because it is lovely, because I tried recipes online.
I'm going to show you some spelt bread here. Right, this is a loaf of spelt bread. Well, it's actually half a loaf because it's been wolfed. Yeah. But it is soft, it is light, it is great for making sandwiches. Delicious toast, absolutely superb toast. And we just make it in the bread maker. But you have to use it on either a special spelt programme or a rapid bake programme.
Mine's a rapid bake. But the reason I started making my own bread years and years ago was because I don't like the preservatives, I don't like the salt, don't like the sugar in shop bought bread. But with Penny's bread, she uses honey, which I hadn't thought of before, and it's really lovely. It just gives it a really lovely flavour.
But it doesn't taste particularly sweet.
No, it doesn't, but it also gives it a really nice texture.
Just enough to activate the yeast.
We'll put it out and just have a go. The spelt bread is slightly more expensive. Flour is slightly more expensive, but it is worth it.
I know, but making your own bread out of your own spelt will be cheaper than buying bread.
Yes.
Or at least good quality.
Yeah. Have a go and let us know how you get on. Photos would be lovely. I might put my failed photo on and
if it rises and then sinks before it's cooked, that means your rising time is too long. That's all I'm going to say now.
Yeah.
But we can do further troubleshooting if it arises.
Yeah, let us know. She is the bread. What are you? The bread professional.
I don't know. Bread queen? I don't know.
Bread professor.
Anyway,
professor of bread.
We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Have a great week.
Bye.
People live in poverty, children born in slavery. A world who live on rubbish heaps. You tell me you've got too much to do.